everyone, it's Claire Snowden here, and I'd like to welcome you to our latest working group webinar, which is going to be given by LucyCulliford today. We've got a really nice audience of approaching 40 people, so it should be potentially a nice discussion at the end. So you're all very welcome to join in and think about questions that you might want to put to Lucy as she's talking. She's going to be talking to us today about making more of your study by using SWATs, which is a really nice, interesting topic for us. And any of you who heard Sean Treweek talk previously on one of our webinars will know that it's something that we could all be thinking about. You might want to go back and have a listen if you haven't. Lucy's been working in clinical trials for quite a while, for almost 20 years, since 2002. And she was a key person in building up the clinical trial and evaluation unit at Bristol. And if you're interested in their work, they have a nice website that you can look at. It was previously a small team of only 4 people, but now it's about 50. So there's a lot of work going on there. Lucy's been involved in a wide range of observational and interventional studies that are CTIMP and non-CTIMP, so she's very experienced and has a particular interest in surgical RCTs. Recently, she's followed her methodological interests for trials and has been working independently, but also as part of a large funded collaboration across the UK. So she has a lot of experience that she's bringing to bear on her talk today. As I said, if you want to put any questions to Lucy, we'll have a Q&A session at the end. If you have a microphone, you're very welcome to talk. It'd be really nice to have some discussion going. If not, please put your questions in the chat box, and Lucy and I will be able to see them, and we'll read them out for everyone and we'll address them as well as we can. Sometimes those discussions get a bit full, but we will make sure we try to get back to every single question. Lucy, can I hand over to you? Be interested to hear what you have to say today.
Yep. Okay, thank you very much, Claire, and thank you, everybody. Thank you for inviting me today. My screen seems to have frozen. 1 second. Oh no, my slides aren't going through.
Oh. Well, maybe we can invite Rionfa in, who might be able to give us some advice on that.
Lucy,
yep.
Have you clicked on the PowerPoint slide?
Yes, yep. I'll try again. Let me just try again.
Yeah.
There we go. It was, yes. Sorry, here we go.
In the meantime, I'll just give a heads up to, there's a couple of you who have your videos switched on, so we can all see you at your desks. That may be perfectly fine for you, but if you want to close them down, do take the time now to do it.
Okay, I've got the technology working now, so sorry for that delay. So yes,
right.
You already know the title of the talk today. I'm just leaving it on this first page just quickly so that you can see that you've got my email address and the email address of the study that I'm going to be talking about. So if you have any questions later on after this webinar's finished, then you can get in touch with me and we can discuss them that way. So I just wanted to give a bit of background of kind of where we were coming from and why we decided we wanted to try to start doing some SWATs. And it's, you know, the same kinds of challenges that everyone's facing at the moment, and that there's a constant pressure to be efficient when we're running trials. Funding bodies are often asking us to cut our budgets, and obviously there's limited, you know, there's finite resources to be used for clinical trials. We also have a finite population of potential research participants, so you know they're not an endless supply. But probably most importantly for me, we currently have quite a lack of evidence of what could be considered good practice in clinical trials. Often a lot of what we do because we've always done it that way. And in order to be efficient, in order to make the most of our trials, we really ought to know whether what we're doing is the best way of doing it. So that could be around recruitment, that could be around follow-up, any of those kind of aspects. We need to know that the way we're doing it is the best way to do it. So one way to address that is to do some SWATs. And these, I'm sure, as Sean may have mentioned in a previous webinar, these offer efficiency because you can answer some methodological questions within another trial that's already funded. It means you can answer more than just the primary research question with your research population and within your trial. And hopefully it will generate good evidence for good practice so that actually we can all start being more efficient and actually using what's best. And another key thing for people like us who work in an academic environment is actually it allows the trial manager to get their own publications out, because often they're on an academic pathway and they don't often get the chance to be first author on some of the trial papers, because the CI will take that role. So they can then take ownership of the SWATs and publish those in their own right. So that can be really useful for the trial managers, and they can find that very rewarding. It's not without its challenges. I mean, we see this every day at the moment, in that, you know, trials are busy enough as they are. The trial managers are extremely busy with this main study, so actually trying to shoehorn some extra work into it can be very difficult. You may face reluctance from the CI, and we certainly see that, and some CIs worry that it's diverting attention from the primary research question, and also sometimes the SWAT may involve extra resources which may not be available, but I'll come on to later on how we might address a few of those things. So our main focus of using SWATs at the moment, we are using some in some of our RCTs, but actually I've spent more time embedding some into a large cohort study. And the reason why we've done that is that it's a very large study, so we can get answers quickly. We are approaching up to 1,000 patients a year to take part. It's a long-term project. It's going to be taking place for at least 5 years, possibly 10 years. And this means that we have a chance that we can do a SWAT, say in a year or two, and then we can implement findings of that SWAT for future years of the cohort. And also it allows us to run multiple SWATs throughout the study. So just to give you a little bit of background, the host study is called OMAX, which is Outcome Monitoring After Cardiac Surgery. And basically it's a cohort study looking to recruit every cardiac surgery patient. And we want to collect in-hospital data on them, quality of life questionnaires, and also get permission to collect routine data such as HAIRS and ONS data. At the time that the SWAT was done, we were approaching patients for consent 3 months after their operation. So when they were at home, we would send them a letter and ask them if they'd like to take part. And then this was followed up at 12 months with a follow-up questionnaire. We had 3 SWATs planned, but we had to drop one. So 2 SWATs are planned and one's been completed, and there are more to come. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about the one that we've now completed. So the first SWAT was whether we did quite a lot of work to try and make our information leaflets look nice and look more appealing, but we didn't know how important that was to patients. And actually, particularly when this is a postal consent, we thought that the appearance is kind of, you know, it's the first appearance that might matter. So we did some work to try and work out whether the appearance of the information leaflet matters to patients and whether it can influence consent to the study. So I don't know how easy it is to see, but this is just some screenshots to give you an idea of what the different PIRs looked like. So basically the information in each of these A, B and C is exactly the same. They're just formatted in different ways. So C is kind of like just a very standard letter format. It's a double-sided A4 sheet of paper that's just straightforward text. A was our intervention. Although it looks flat on the page, it's actually a trifold leaflet, double-sided leaflet. It's professionally designed using a package called InDesign, and it was professionally printed, and it's full colour on glossy paper. And then B is like somewhere in between. It was also produced using the specialist software. It has some colour and some formatting, but not quite as much as A. So we randomised patients to in an equal proportion to receive each of the 3 formats. The patients themselves didn't know about the RCT, so they just knew they were being invited to take part in this cohort study into OMAX. They didn't know anything about the different formats. The planned sample size was almost 1,600 patients. And it was fairly easy for us to administer. Basically, we did a monthly mail out, and the database printed out 3 sets or 3 piles of letters, effectively labelled A, B, and C, and the trial administrators just put the right PAL with the right letter. So we sent out, in the end, we sent out 1,500 invitation letters. It's just short of our original target size. And that's because, for a number of reasons, we've moved to face-to-face consent in hospital, and that happened when we were at the point of about 1500, so we decided just to stop the study slightly early. And our randomization was effective, so we had more or less equal numbers of patients receiving each of the formats. And also this table just shows you overall the age and the sex of the patients. As you can see, the first line shows the age, and in each of the 3 PIL groups, they were more or less the same. They were on average about 65 years old, and on average about 70% of the recipients were male. And that reflects the fact that cardiac surgery is actually is more common for men to have than women. So we'll come on to the actual results. So we overall 42% of patients consented to take part in OMACS, and this was split across the PILs, 40% for PIL-A, 45% for B, and 41% for C. Disappointingly, it wasn't quite significant. So we were comparing everything to PIL-C because that's our standard format, and the hybrid 1B, that's kind of a hybrid between the two, the very fancy and the basic PIL, generally was 4% higher return rate, but that was non-significant. And there's basically no difference between PIL-A and C. And that was unfortunately disappointing because we had actually done this interim analysis midway through to go to a conference with the results. And at that point, B was actually significantly better than the other two. But when we finished, that wasn't the case. To complement the actual quantitative work, we also took the information leaflets to a PPI group and asked them what they felt about them. And in general, they preferred the hybrid PIL-B because they found it was easier to read than PIL-C, which is the basic one. And they kind of felt that the one that was used with using the InDesign software, that was the trifold leaflet, they felt that it just looked too professional, and it looked like something you might just get as advertising material. One of them compared it to something you might get from a takeaway through your door. So although our quantitative results weren't significant, everyone was kind of leaning in the same direction, that PIL-B was possibly slightly better. So although it wasn't significant, we decided that we're actually going to use PIL-B going forward, and we've since transferred the formatting into Microsoft Word so that we don't have to use the InDesign software to produce it. So we're now using PIL-B in the host study, and we're also using it in other RCTs as our basic template for PILs, but there's obviously more work to be done. And although the result was disappointing that it wasn't significantly different, it does feel like it's in keeping with other trials that have done similar work, where you might get a slight increase in uptake, but not anything significant, unfortunately. So the second SWAT we were looking at in OMACS is actually looking at the other end of the study and how we can maximise follow-up for these patients. So how can we maximise questionnaire return rate? And this is actually part of a national SWAT that's happening in several settings across the country, and it's a SWAT that's on the SWAT Repository. And it's using a theoretically informed cover letter to improve response rates to annual poster questionnaires. And I think the next slide, I've just got, for those who are not familiar with the SWAT Repository, it's based in Northern Ireland. I've got the web address there, and it's a fantastic resource. I think it's something like 60 SWATs on there now, and they're free to use. I mean, obviously you need to acknowledge the original authors of it, but they provide you with the materials you need in order to do the SWAT in your study. So they provide you with a short protocol, they provide you with wording for your ethics application, whether it be an initial application or an amendment. So we haven't started this, we're about to start it now. So we're going to randomise patients in a 1-to-1 ratio to either our standard follow-up letter or the intervention one. We need about 2,000 patients in order to see our proposed difference. We're hoping to get a 5% difference in, or 5% increase in questionnaire return rates. And these screenshots just show you roughly what the difference between the two letters. So on the left hand side you have our standard letter, which is very brief, just basically to the point, please can you fill this questionnaire in. The one on the left, and I'll go into a bit more detail in a minute, shows you the theoretically informed cover letter, which you can see is much longer. So I've just taken a few paragraphs from that letter just to sort of show you the kind of difference. And it's been designed with some input from psychologists, and the idea is that it has behaviour changing phrases in the letter. So it is quite full on. I mean, the first time I read it, I did start cringing because it does feel quite full on compared to what we would normally write to a patient. But it talks about strong commitment, that the surgeons have placed considerable trust in their patients when they asked to join, that we couldn't be successful without their continued cooperation. It also suggests kind of practical ways that people can remember to do the questionnaire. So, leaving it somewhere obvious where you will see it to complete it, and also putting the envelope containing the completed questionnaire somewhere where you're likely to remember to go and to post it. So, and also it kind of makes sure that people understand that every individual contribution is important, and that actually, some people might feel, oh, it doesn't matter if I don't reply, but actually it tries to reinforce that everyone's contribution is important. So we shall see what happens with this one. So that's all I have to say at the moment. I just wanted to add one extra thing, in that if you are thinking of doing a SWAT, but you're worried that you haven't got resources to do it, there is some of you might be aware of a national programme called Prometheus, which is MRC funded. It's being led by York, although I'm one of the co-applicants on it. And you can ask for your SWAT to be adopted by them, and they will then provide you with some limited resources or some money to actually pay for some resources to do a SWAT. Their particular focus is recruitment and retention, so the kinds of things I just mentioned. But if you're interested in finding out more about that, then please let me know. Okay, I'll hand back to Claire now. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy. And that was a really good tip about Prometheus, and a really helpful talk as well. I do have a couple of questions that I'm interested to put to you, but firstly, can we turn to a comment by Susan, who's asking just for a bit of clarification from a phrase you meant. You mentioned something being theoretically informed, and she's just asking if we could clarify that. Maybe you could go back to the slide that was on.
Yeah. That's the actual title of the Swatch. Which is not my wording, but I think it basically means that they've had psychologists look at it and develop what they know are behaviour changing phrases. I think that's what the theoretically informed part of it means.
Okay.
Does that help?
Okay. Yes, I'm sure it does. Thank you very much. Susan says it does. So given that you didn't have the significant finding that you were hoping for,
yes.
Do you plan to do any further work to look at this more closely, or are you happy with the evidence base that you have?
We do, yeah. We only had that result last week, unfortunately, so it's still fresh. And I'd actually written a paper based on the interim analysis, assuming that it would be the same and that it would be significant. So we're a bit in a bit of a, it's all new to us at the moment. But yeah, we've been talking about how we might actually do some more work. Whether doing it within OMAX is ideal because of the volume of information we send out, but we might also do some work within our some of our big RCTs as well on the same thing. I'm not quite sure what that's going to be at the moment. I think what I might do is go back to the PPI group first and sort of talk to them in a bit more detail about what they think is important when it comes to how the information looks. We're also kind of straying into sort of we're actually doing a swap with another group who are looking at different forms, looking at electronic forms and those kinds of things. So, maybe we can't do much more with paper. Maybe the way that it doesn't really matter that much. It's the actual wording matters the most. And once you've optimised the wording, you can't do much more. And maybe actually making it available in different formats is the way forward.
Well, that would be an interesting piece of research. Yeah. And actually that segues us nicely into two very similar questions which have come in from Sean Truick, who I mentioned spoke to us about SWATs a while back, and Rochelle, who are both asking about public patient involvement in the design of the patient information leaflets. So Sean wants to know, were they involved? You've alluded to them, so they clearly were, but maybe you could tell us a bit more about that. And Rochelle wants to ask, were they a separate PPI group and not the same as the patients who were asked to comment on the pill in the context of the trial?
Yes, they were separate, so they're fairly independent, and yes, they were completely separate. No, I have to say they weren't involved in the actual design. We basically came up with the design ourselves and then took it to them. But in general, for our other RCTs, we do actually we give our PPI groups the draft PILs to look at. But I think it's an area we could do more about. And I went to a PPI group yesterday, and it was from the questions they were asking, it was quite clear that what they think is important to know is very different to what we think is important to know. So I think there is more work to be done in that area.
And were the things that they wanted to know unexpected?
I guess if we thought about it, probably not. They're very. One of them was very concerned about, so this was a group looking at information for a randomised controlled trial, and so they were things like, they wanted to know about what the surgeon really thought about it, and whether, whereas we're trying to sort of give a balanced view of, we don't really know which group is better because that's why we're doing the trial. They were much more interested in kind of personal opinions, which we couldn't put into an information leaflet, but that was quite interesting.
Yeah, it is. We have a comment which picks up what you were saying about you felt a little bit uncomfortable with some of the language that the psychologists were suggesting should go into the pill. And I'm not sure exactly who it's from, but somebody's asking if you received any feedback from ethics regarding that language and whether it was sort of seen as coercive or precious.
We've done a recent amendment to put this through, and no, they didn't have any comments on it at all. So I was quite surprised. I was expecting some feedback from them, but no. And I guess, it has been, I know the team that used it originally, I think they're called iQuad, and Sean will know who they are. They're based in Scotland. They said they didn't have any issues, I think, getting it through ethics as well.
Because you could imagine them saying something like your last sentence where it says the study will not be successful. You could say the study would benefit from the continued cooperation.
Yes, yeah.
So maybe they could have asked you to flip it a little bit.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, definitely. Yeah,
so
no, I was. That one there. Yes, not successful.
Maybe mild peril is what the psychologist feels will be useful. So let's have a look at some of the other questions, because there's quite a lot coming in. You've obviously sort of stimulated some interest. Daryl's asking, how did you arrive at the sample size for SWAT 1? And what was
I left that out, didn't I?
Rate of consent that you would have considered significant?
There was a full sample size calculation, so I did leave that off the slide just for brevity. There was a full sample size, but unfortunately it was. This is probably part of the issue, perhaps why we lacked power, in that the consent rates that we based our power calculation on, or sample size calculation on, were based on another study very similar to this we ran a few years ago, where we were having about sort of 70% plus consent rates. So our power calculation basically assumed that the baseline consent rate would be 70, and actually it was nearer to 40 in the end. And we were looking for a 5% increase, and we had 90% power to do that. So there was a full sample size calculation.
Right. Okay, thank you. And Susan's taking us back into this idea of sort of permissions, really. She was, but here thinking about this, what the sponsor asked them. She said it's interesting that your patients were not informed of being randomised into SWAT 1. When I try to do something similar, our sponsor asks for the participants to be informed after the SWAT. So not before, but after.
Oh, okay. I mean, we could do that, but we haven't done it. But yeah, they didn't ask for that at all. No.
And ethics didn't ask you to think about that either?
No, they didn't know. Maybe because what we were doing, it was all the same information. It was literally just the formatting. So maybe they thought it wasn't. I don't know. But no, we haven't been asked to do that.
Yeah, and continuing with that theme of ethics, someone's asking if you can discuss how you went about gaining ethical approval. Is each SWAT a separate research application, ethics application?
We haven't for this one. No. This one is the original SWAT was actually in the original application, and then the second SWAT has been added as an amendment.
Okay, and were there any particular challenges in securing it approval?
Not approval, no. I mean, the main thing is actually the coordinator involved was quite busy, so it just actually we had planned the second one. We planned to start a long time ago, but it just hasn't happened, unfortunately.
Yeah. And obviously the logistics of running SWATs are interesting people. So Faye's asking, were the SWATs included in the main study protocol?
Yes.
Right, okay.
Yes, they are definitely listed. Yeah, they're all, yeah.
Okay, so you need to be thinking about these from the start as you're developing your trial. But I guess, sorry, go on.
I was going to say, I mean, you can add them later. I mean, so we are planning to add more in, but those, certainly the first one was definitely the protocol from the start. That was something we want to do right from the start. And I guess that's easier if you can do it that way, but you equally can add them as amendments, later on.
Okay. And how did you estimate the baseline consent rates for the sample size calculation? So we're going back to things you were talking about earlier, and was the study already running at that point?
So the baseline were based on another study, another cohort study, which is very similar, where we approached patients after their operation, and as I said before, we were getting about sort of 70% return rates for that one. We're still not sure why we're getting so much lower across the board, lower consent rates with this study than we were before, but as now we've actually moved to face-to-face consent now anyway, so we're back up to sort of 80 to 90% uptake now. But yes, the baseline were based on a previous similar study.
Okay.
And we started this PIL SWAT right from the word go in this host study.
Yeah, well, that makes sense, doesn't it, really? So to capture everybody, and you're capturing them from the very start of their exposure to the study. Yeah. Daryl's interested to know where you're intending to publish the results and whether there's some journals that are quite interested in SWATs.
I haven't made up my mind. The paper's nearly written. It'll either go to trials, I guess, or possibly I forgot the name of the other one. There's another trial methodology journal, but yeah.
Controlled clinical trials.
It might. There's the BMC trial methodology, I think it's called.
Okay.
There's a few potential target journals that are out there, but I think trials will be the first one to go for.
Yeah, it would make sense. It would definitely make sense. Sean has got some interesting things to say, and they're sort of comments rather than questions. Sean, if you have a microphone, you're very welcome to tell us about these things if you like. I can move to another question, and you can decide if you'd like to.
Okay.
To jump
can you hear me now?
Oh yeah.
Does that work?
Yes.
Yep. Hi.
Yep. Take it away.
Excellent. Thanks. Thanks, Lucy, for that talk. I just want to add a couple of things about ethics. So the first one was to do with, I think somebody asked a question about the wording. I think you described it as full on. I'm not aware of ethical committees raising comments about the wording. I agree it looks quite different, the sort of wording we are used to seeing, but it has not been raised as an ethical issue. I am aware in one of the SWAT 24 evaluations of one site being unwilling to use the letter. So it wasn't an objection from the ethical committees, but it was an objection from site staff. But in the main, it hasn't been an issue. And it's great that you're going to do another evaluation of that. So we have a nice body of evidence coming from that SWAT 24 right now. And then the other comment was just a more general one about ethics and SWATs. Without talking about the experience, we've in Aberdeen in the last day decided to not do a SWAT this year because of substantial problems getting sponsor approval, actually. So there are some challenges with getting SWATs approved, and I am working together with the Health Research Authority, and at the policy level they recognise that we're often trying to squeeze a circle into a square hole, or the other way around. So what we're trying to do with the Health Research Authority is develop some categories of SWAT. So there'll be, depending on the potential risk that the SWAT poses, and generally they're all very low risk, but there might be quite different approvals processes for the SWATs, including for one category, no approvals at all. So the HRA is aware that it can be more of a challenge than it should be, given the risk the SWAT intervention poses. and we are working with them to try and change that. So over the course of, I think, 2019, I'd like to see that we have some very clear guidance from HRA on SWATs specifically, because you can run into problems with sponsors and ethical committees and indeed others when trying to get these types of studies approved.
Do you think there'd be any plans to publish those that guidance?
Yes,
Sean?
absolutely. In fact, I sent something yesterday as the low-hanging fruit for some types of SWAT which do not involve patients and public, so trial participants, but involve trial staff. And they, as far as HRA policy people are concerned, there's a very clear no approvals needed position from them. So what I'm hoping to do with that guidance is that would appear on the HRA website, and we could always refer to that. So if you're going to our sponsor for some reason or talking about doing this piece of work, then there'd be some clear guidance that would back up the decision that actually we don't need to do approvals for this SWAT because it falls into SWAT category 1. When we get to the other categories, so one is essentially there is no way in which we cannot get ethical judgment on it, that we would send it for a proportionate review that would be light touch, and probably lighter touch than proportionate review. And then there's a middle category where essentially it looks like it might need ethical approval in the current framework, but the risk posed by the SWAT intervention is so low that effectively we don't consider it to be worth anybody's effort to do that evaluation, that ethical evaluation. So it would, and from my point of view, a prime example of that would be a Christmas card, which is where we in Aberdeen have completely hit a brick wall with our sponsor.
That's a shame.
So a Christmas card in principle is participant facing, participants get it, but the risk posed to participants by the Christmas card is as low as I could possibly imagine an intervention being in terms of risk. So you might say we need ethical review in the current framework, but actually the risk is so small, we don't think it's worth anybody's time, both ethics and indeed the trial teams and the SWAT evaluation team. So HRA at the policy level is completely on board and aware that the current ethical framework, the approvals framework in the UK, causes more trouble for SWATs than really the risk of those SWAT intervention justifies. And they are working with us to try and smooth out those wrinkles. So it's not going to be something that happens in January, but I'm hoping that we will make steady progress during next year on that.
Brilliant, thanks. Claire, can I just add that that reminded me of a story I heard about a SWAT that was looking at recruitment, and the ethics committee insisted that the patients be told about this SWAT, which then you could imagine could affect the way, I can't remember quite what the intervention was now, but it was something around how information was presented to patients. And so if you're telling patients that there is a SWAT to look at recruitment, that's obviously going to change their behaviour and kind of probably undo the work of the SWAT. So it's great that the HRA are onto this, and will hopefully make it more streamlined and also more consistent across the board as well.
Yes, that's not particularly helpful, is it? That sort of revealing the key information that will change behaviour in itself. There may be some interesting leads that can be taken from work done in relation to cluster trials, where one of the points is not to contaminate people who might talk to each other or be exposed to a similar set of information or intervention. So that there might be some good sort of arguments that have been put forward for cluster trials that could be picked up and used to make a similar defence. I know it's not a cluster, but that you're trying to avoid this sort of contamination. Thank you very much, Sean. That was really helpful for you to join in there. We are coming towards the end of our questions now, but I don't want to miss any out. I hope there's none that have missed out that are further up. But Rhys would like to take us back to something that you said much earlier about the significant result that seemed to be there when you did your interim analysis. Oh, sorry. Sorry, the questions have just moved at my page and I can't see it anymore. Sorry, if you just bear with me while I search for it. It was a spontaneous jump. Unless you can see it, Lucy.
No, I can't see any questions here actually. Maybe
If you have a look, there's a chat box. You may be able to look in the chat.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think I remember what it was, that Reese was asking how the significance, what level of significance it was, and why it hadn't been enough to sort of stop at that point. I think that's what it was.
I can't remember, to be honest, exactly. I know that it was actually the difference was slightly bigger at that point, but I think the significance was only borderline. It wasn't a it wasn't a barnstorm. Yes, we definitely got answers. That's why it was hovering around 0.05. So that's why we decided to carry on.
Okay, thank you. And again, another question about the design theory. People are quite interested, I think, in this idea of the psychologist being involved. How much design theory was applied by the person designing A and B, or were they just asked to make it look better?
Oh yeah, I mean it was done from we have a colleague that's got a graphic design background, so it was kind of using her graphic design principles as to sort of, it was about looking good rather than anything else. Yeah.
Okay, so it was less to do with ideal length and content and readability.
Yeah, so we kind of already had a very short PIL anyway, so we'd worked quite hard before we came up with the idea of the different formats. We'd worked quite hard to try and simplify the information and make sure it was really short. So, and we hoped the readability was of a good level, and then it was just about making it look nice, and it was, you know, the text was exactly the same across the three formats.
Okay. Well, that's great, thank you. We've covered all of the questions that have been put in the chat box now, and that's really good because we've had almost 60 people join us today,
Oh.
so it's nice to have so much input. If there's anything anybody wants to sort of follow up with Lucy, she kindly gave her email at the beginning, and you'll all be able to listen again. If there's a couple of people who had problems with the slides. This talk will become available on our website in due course, so you'll be able to listen again and look at the slides there. So thank you very, very much for a useful and interesting discussion. When you leave the webinar, you'll be given a link to a website for feedback. It's really helpful for us to know what sort of reach the webinars have and if they're useful. So please, if you could fill that out. It's not just a normal survey, it really is very useful to us to know who we're getting to and what sort of size of audience and what people think. And as I usually say, if anybody's interested in giving one of these webinars, if you have work that you would like to circulate in this way, and then it will stay on our website for quite a long time and other people can access it afterwards as well, you'd be very welcome to get in touch and offer. So thank you very much, Lucy, and thank you everybody for making it an interesting discussion. Oh, okay. I should have said, sorry, we don't have a webinar in December, so you'll be seeing us again in January. Okay, thank you all.
Thank you very much, Claire.
Thank you, Lucy.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.